Hey, it's Drew Neiser, and we've got an amazing bonus huddle here for an elite group of huddlers as we talk with Lori Wizdo of Forrester. Being customer obsessed has always sounded like a good idea, but it takes an economic slowdown to make it an obsession of the C-suite. Suddenly, with new customers harder to find and even harder to convert, all eyes, and that's sales, marketing, everybody are turning to the current customers as really the only available growth engine. And while this isn't a problem marketers can resolve on their own, there's a major leadership opportunity for CMOs to grab the reins and help their companies develop customer-obsessed growth engines. To help us understand exactly how to do this, we are joined, as I mentioned at the top, by Lori Wizdo, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester. Lori has been with Forrester for 12 years, and prior to that had an extensive career in marketing, primarily for tech companies. So hello, Lori, welcome. How are you this fine day?
I am well, Drew, and I am delighted to be joining the huddle today.
That's awesome. And where are you, most importantly?
I'm in Philadelphia.
All right. Well, just down the highway. All right. So let's set the stage here. I mentioned at the top customer obsession. It sounds like a nice idea, but have you all quantified the value? Can you share the big picture data from your research?
Yes, Forrester's been conducting customer obsession research for, I think this is our fourth survey on the customer obsession characteristics. And now this is a little bit hard to explain, but basically companies that are customer obsessed have 10% higher performance numbers in revenue, in growth, in profits, customer satisfaction, and employee satisfaction at 3 times the rate of companies that are not customer obsessed. So it's 3 times for the rate of exceptional performance, which we define as 10% or better.
So wait, so just to be clear, companies that meet these criteria of being customer obsessed are 3 times more successful than non-customer obsessed companies.
That's well summarized.
And that's defined in terms of their growth is at least 10% or more in revenue, profits, and customer retention, all 3?
And employee experience.
Oh, so all 4.
That's really 4, yeah.
Wow, all right. So 3X is huge, and that has to make stakeholders happy, and it makes you wonder why more companies aren't customer obsessed. So does your research identify what percentage of companies actually meet that criteria?
Yes, yeah, we do. And the bar is high for customer obsession, and the percentage to reach it is low. So the number of customer obsessed companies is 7%. Now that is up from 4% like 4 years ago. So we're moving in the right direction. Now, I should also say that you don't go from not customer obsessed to customer obsessed. There's customer obsessed, there's customer naive is the first one, customer aware, customer centric, and customer obsessed. So the vast majority of the clients are in the customer concerned, that is the customer focused, that is right before obsessed.
So there are a lot of people on the cusp here about to make it into customer obsessed, but still 7% feels like a shockingly low number. And I don't quite get it. Why do you think that number is so low? Well, maybe I should ask it differently, since you mentioned there are a lot of people in the customer concerned. I mean, is that 20%? Is that is there another massive number of group that's about to meet your criteria?
It's about 50. Okay. I don't recall the number right now. So it is that, but there hasn't been like I said, there's only been over the last like 4 years, there's only been 3% that moved from that category into truly customer obsessed.
And so, well, let's just talk about why is it so important that companies take better care of customers right now?
Well, I want to clarify one thing, that customer obsession, the way we define it, is not necessarily just about focusing on the customer base. It is a strategy for acquiring new customers as well. And elements of it actually extend to a strategy for making sure your partners and your value ecosystem are, are happy and focus, obsessing on those as well. So it is, but I think you are right in saying that it gains more salience with the organization, the enterprise, when the competition for new revenue gets so tight.
Yeah. So I'm excited to think about this more broader than simply keeping customers and upselling them and cross-selling them. And I want to make sure before we leave that and sort of break down this notion of customer obsession, how does being customer obsessed, in terms of your definition of that, end up helping with acquisition?
Well, elements of being customer obsessed, it's first of all, there's a huge part of it is focusing on value. And if the more we really focus on value and understanding value for the way the customer perceives value, the more likely we are to win in that competition for new revenue from new customers. But the other aspect of being customer obsessed that's important is thinking about customer experience at all stages of the customer life cycle. And so if we are thinking about the customer experience and delivering value at every stage of the customer life cycle, we're going to differentiate ourselves in the early stages of the customer's buying cycle, when they're if we're making it easier for them to understand what it is, the problem they're trying to explore, if we're making it easier for them to research the problem they're trying to find solutions for and research, if we're making it easier to compare options, these are all things, all the ways we're adding value. And it's and talk about, kind of bars being not met. One of the numbers that stunned me when I was doing research for the customer obsessed growth engine is that 83% of the customers who actually completed the deal, said they were dissatisfied with something about the vendor from whom they bought. That was the winning vendor, and 83% were not happy with something about the vendor, something about the experience, and conceivably something about the solution and product as well. But that was the number that jumped out at me. Out of all the numbers I've seen in 12 years at Forrester, that one was like, wow, we are not getting it.
And is this, some of this just sort of classic buyer's remorse, or that there's something, and is there any consistency with those complaints, or is it all over the board?
There's a lot of complaints about making it difficult to find information. There are a lot of complaints about transparency and trust. So I think there's, one of the things that we say about value, and I think I wish I'd invented this statement, but I didn't, but that it's not about extracting value from customers, and companies that continue to operate with models that are really designed to extract value from customers are going to fail. And if you think about it, we every stage of most vendors' engagement strategies are about extracting value. They're about, okay, I want to get your name early in the stage and your email address, and then I want to get you to click on this and attend my webinar, and then I want your money. And so we never think about we just don't think about it that way. What am I giving to you in exchange for that?
Okay, I'm with you all the way on this, and I want to make sure that we get through the building blocks. So we've talked about outcomes in terms of revenue growth and profit margin and retention rates, and we even talked about employee satisfaction. But let's get sort of basic in terms of the building blocks. We've talked about customer value a little bit, but let's look at them all and let's do it one at a time. Maybe you could give the sort of, I don't know if it's 4 or 5, but with the pillars of being customer obsessed, and then we'll go through them.
Well, I think the how this really comes out, I think, is that something we just released or started talking about, which is the customer obsessed growth engine.
Right.
Because we wanted to make customer obsession more real, and customer obsession leads to growth. And so we wanted to articulate how customer obsession leads to growth. And there are three pillars, and I'll list them and then we can go through them individually. But the three like major elements are focus on customer value, buyer value, customer value, alignment. And alignment is, well, I want to talk about that a little bit, because alignment is something we're all kind of tired of hearing about and think we got it, and we don't. And then the third one is actually thinking about tech differently, the technology infrastructure, and taking more of a, how can tech create value? Again, not just enable our processes, but really create value for the customer, be a source of innovation in customer value creation. So those are the three, really. It's focus on the customer, focus on customer value, alignment, and elegant use of tech.
You know, it's funny, is that, so we're going to go through customer value now, but as I think about it, I mean, I've been talking about on my show, marketing as a service for 10, 15 years, about this notion that marketing can add value every step of the stage. And I think there's some appreciation for that. But it feels to, you know, in terms of, we've got to deliver value. There's got to be an exchange of value. It can't simply being about buy now. Yet your research says that this still isn't happening. So let's talk about this value and value exchange and enabling it. And give us an example of what we're talking about.
Well, I think that, you know, we've talked about value throughout my entire career, you know, and so, but to some extent, the value we think about and sort of inculcated in our heads is the value that our products and services will deliver, that, you know, how it will manifest. And so it's only recently that marketing is thinking about the role of marketing is not just to be a source of lead gen for the load-bearing sales force, but to actually help enable a buyer through the buying journey. That's, you know, when we ask right now, the number of companies in our surveys that say they rely on buyer journey mapping for their engagement strategy is pretty high, it's 75%. But again, I've been here a long time, and that number was as low as 38% just a couple of years ago. So you can't, if you know, there's a mindset shift in saying, I'm not just a supplier of leads to the load-bearing sales force, I'm marketing is the engineer of experience across the entire life cycle. That's just a mindset shift, and it takes a long time for mindset shifts to happen and then to become behaviors. Then it takes process change after that. And so I need to be thinking about, okay, what's my buyer's objective at this stage? And we have seen some tremendous, I'll give you an example. This is one company that switched its, the way it looked at its customer segments from a traditional industry and size. And they just kind of threw that out the window and said, our customers are more like themselves. They segment more naturally into their maturity levels in using products and services like ours. So they came up with 4 maturity levels, and they were, this happened to be a company was doing outsourcing in the supply chain and logistics area. And they had 4 maturity levels. The lowest was never. They'd never outsourced anything in their supply chain. The highest was believer, which they strategically used outsourcing as a mechanism for cost control and agility. And there were 2 in between, which it's not my business, so I don't remember them that well. But that you can just see, I love this example, because you can just see that if I'm thinking about what a never buyer needs in the early stages of their buying journey, they need to know, why would I even consider this? Why would I make this decision? What's the upside? What's the downside? What's the risk? If you think of someone in the always, they know that, but what they would need to know is why you. So why you? Why are you going to be a good long-term partner for me? Why are you more scalable, more reliable, more risk-proof? And so they categorize categorized existing customers by work surveys and by working with salespeople, and they created content for these different maturity levels, and then they just categorized new names by the content consumption patterns. And the reason I like this story is it's almost a parable, because everything they measured in terms of their performance as a marketing organization, whether it was click-throughs or leads or conversions from this to that, increased by a factor of 4 to 5 times. So if they were getting like 3%, they were now getting 12 or 15% that's. And so it was just, was consistent across everything they measured, because they were really, once they really put themselves in their buyer's context, and it was probably easier for them than some companies have more complex portfolios, a more complicated basket of outcomes. But once they put themselves really in their customer's context at every stage of the buyer's journey, they were delivering much more value, and of course, they got the results.
Right. It makes total sense. In that now you have 4 buckets of people that you can actually get to know and also understand what it is that they need in order to sort of move along and sort of get to this believer stage, which I imagine that would be, an ideal world for them, is that they have a bunch of believers in there.
Well, most of their repeat customers, their good customers, are in the believer category, but also, there's an opportunity to steal believers away from other vendors, and so there's always this mix between, in any stage of these maturity segments, between acquisition and customers. But again, in terms of why, you can see how much you can envision how much it took to do that, to get there. It was like a 2 to 3 year journey after they made the mindset shift. Marketing is just a lot of work.
And how do you, because this is the thing I'm thinking about with a lot of CMOs and in the CMO huddle world, is getting the organization behind this kind of shift is a recognition of a problem and a new way of doing business. And those are 2 very important sort of things that they need to overcome. And it's a lot of, because then everything else has to line against it too, right? Because the buyer enablement for the believer versus the never, these are going to look like completely different experiences.
Yeah, they are. Marketing doesn't make this mindset shift alone. And if it does, then we're not aligned, right?
Right.
There's a lot of data that's available from Forrester and other places about what's changed. Buyers, buying groups are getting more complex, and there are more players. There are more engagements. Interestingly, in 2021, we passed sort of a Rubicon with regard to human versus digital engagement. And for the first time ever, engagement with digital properties, there were a higher number of engagement with digital properties during a buying process than with human properties, human people, or just humans, I think we call them. So, and that was that was accelerated by COVID, of course, but it didn't go back, right? Once you cross that barrier, it didn't go back. So there's data about the change. And there's data that 83% are not happy with something about their vendor, that we're not doing something right. SG&A costs are going up by 2 or 3% over the last couple of years. And so there's a lot of data that's saying we should change, but the how do we change, particularly in B2B companies that have had a strong biz dev sales-led legacy, that's just there in the culture. So what I generally say in terms of how to do that is it's crawl, walk, run, right? Well, I used to say that. Now I say slither is a starting point often. And if that's where you are, that's okay. But also pilot. You just really have to find, something that's important to the company. That is, we want to break into a new market. We're going to try it a new way. We want to improve our profitability or win rates in this successful segment, but we want to decrease our selling costs, whatever. We want to improve something, but something that is important, that has the eyes of senior management, but that is tractable. And then just try it with that tractable program. measure it. Be careful about how you measure. Make sure you benchmark, because a lot of people will do something and they never benchmarked the initial state. So they're claiming, we're doing this much better. And it's like, well, that doesn't sound so good, but it's better. So make sure you choose your metrics carefully, get agreement that if we do this, this will be good. I mean, manage the pilot well. But I think that it's just easier. There's something I learned long ago in my university psychology class, that it's easier to act ourselves into a way of thinking than think ourselves into a way of acting. So if you apply that at the corporate level, you just basically demonstrate that it's working, and that will accelerate the acceptance of the ideas.
Right. And that pilot notion of piloting a different way to think about customer value. I want to step back. It's funny. One of the CMOs and CMO huddles I was speaking with counted 137 different touches before the contract was signed. And of those, 100 were marketing.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so which is kind of amazing. And it wasn't just up to a certain point and then sales took over. No, they kept coming back. Different members of the buying committee would come and look at some document or so forth.
Yeah.
So I found that sort of startling and wonderful at the same time, because it really elevates the importance of marketing throughout the cycle, and in some ways diminishes the role of sales, I gotta say.
Well, I tell you how I look at it, because I think I don't want to. I mean, we got a lot of good press a couple of years ago with the death of the salesman research thing, but we made a lot of enemies and salespeople. But it's just putting people it's using the right resources at the right time, and there are things that we'll never do through digital engagement, because we don't have enough context, because we won't build the kind of trust, because we can't. No matter how good we are, we're not going to do as good a job at helping the customer envision their success. They have to make, with a lot of the things that probably a lot of your CMOs are taking to market. They're complex solutions to complex problems. The vendor's not going to deliver the value. The customer's going to achieve the value when they achieve the outcome. And there's a lot of companies that trust that their company can do it, that they can lead that change. Getting that shared vision for the future and imbuing someone with that, empowering someone that you can do this, that's the stuff our sales channel can do. Explaining how the ROI model works, or explaining the features, or doing comparisons, or explaining where the value sources are. These are things that people research on their own, and we can do that. So when you do buyer journey mapping and you really go through it, for the, when I go through it with a client for the first time, you really realize that, wow, first of all, the players change in each stage of the journey, and their information needs change. And a lot of them can, and then you say, can we do this digitally, or can't we do this digitally? Do we need more context than we have digitally? And then you start to, like I said, engineer that engagement strategy.
Okay. So we've established that rethinking how you think about customer value and delivering, that marketing is and the organization is delivering value, whatever the value the customer needs, right? And this is sort of the term buyer enablement. We're rethinking that. Okay, that was step 1. Now you mentioned step 2 was alignment, and we've already talked about that a little bit. And it's a word that everyone nods their head and says, but what does it really mean when we're saying we got to get the whole company aligned around the customer? Well,
I think alignment is really interesting, because when you say alignment, everybody's like, yeah, tell me something new. But our research around alignment shows that like only 19% of the marketing executives in our most recent marketing survey said they thought they had good alignment with the rest of the organization, with product and sales was what we defined as that, the rest of the organization. And then we do this future of work survey, which looks at executives across all roles and asked how important is alignment as part of the culture of the organization. And more than half, but still only 55% said it was important. And that means very important and important because that's how we aggregate those two. So that's low in terms of alignment. And so, so so even how we have thought about it, and I think how we've thought about it has been wrong as well, because we tend to align around internal things. We align around process. When does my process end and when does yours begin? And we align around, so we align around handoffs. We align around shared goals and shared metrics. ABM was really useful in helping us align around common audiences, which, like, how could that not have been? But it wasn't all too often. And so, and even then, we still have these alignment problems. So we still need to focus on the blocking and tackling of alignment, but it's the again mindset shift here is to start thinking about, if we're both aligning around the concept of delivering customer value, if product marketing and sales are all saying, what does the customer need from us at this stage of their journey, or how will they realize value? We're kind of instantly, we're calibrating to the customer. And if we calibrate to the customer, we're going to be kind of instantly aligned. So it's a mindset shift. And let's just take the good things we've done in terms of aligning around process and audiences, and now start thinking, let's add value to the mix. Are we, what role can we play? What role can you play? And if we can play a better role, or if we're missing, if nobody's really focused, I mean, there are so many B2B companies that are still underserving the onboarding process, which, if you think about the buyer journey, onboarding is so critical because the entire set of stakeholders on the buyer side changes. And in many, I always say, in many cases, they're victims. A decision was made by somebody else, and now they need to make it happen. And so onboarding is like so critically important. And it was only with the kind of advent of recurring revenue and SaaS models that people even started thinking about it. But it's critical in every B2B sale. So if we start thinking about that, like, again, aligning around value, what the customer needs from us, it's the next dimension of alignment.
And it's funny because I'm so glad you clarified that. And in the conversations that we have in CMO huddles, I mean, we have CMOs who are jointly presenting sales and marketing with the head of sales to their board, to the C-suite. They are aligned in terms of ABM, and you're right, ABM has been a factor. But if you ask them, I think they'd say they were aligned with their head of sales. Maybe not as much with their head of product, but I think this notion of getting aligned around value is definitely that. I mean, one, I can see why that would be so important. Two, I can see why it makes sense, but I can't see why it's so hard. And because if it's only happening 17% of the time, are we just talking about this is such a massive change in terms of mentality and process that they can't just I mean, it took so long to get aligned on process.
Yeah, well, okay. So first of all, we may see different audiences as CMOs, because you may, with the CMOs who are engaging regularly with CMOs and sharing ideas are probably in the vanguard. So, I see across the board. So I don't want to say things aren't happening with your stakeholders that are, but I was having a conversation around go-to-market strategies, a research interview actually, with a very forward-looking CMO, and we were talking about the difficulties in being audience-centric just in go-to-market planning, and being micro-segmented and targeted enough for marketing to communicate well and engage well, but not so micro-targeted that there wasn't enough audience for sales to engage. But he said something during the conversation was that, yes, of course, we plan around, we build programs around, customer value and delivering across the life cycle. But then he said, but in the heat of the moment, it's all about getting the revenue. And so we have to operate, it's reality. I mean, we need to bring in revenue on a regular basis. And our sales team is good at doing that. And if sometimes I can close this deal here where there's actually less value than that deal there where there's actually a lot of value, look, we all want them to close the deal that they can close. Right? So we operate in an imperfect world, and so that's why really it comes down to short-termism and short-termism is well based in reality. Right? So it's hard. It is just hard, and it's a constant reminder. It's like keeping a low flow of energy on this topic and always thinking about it, and recognizing that sometimes we have to act expediently.
And when the small percentage of companies that are customer obsessed, and by your definition of that, the 7%, who's driving that? I mean, is the CMO at the center of this, or is the CEO sort of somehow the light bulb went off and they're sort of mandating it? How does it happen?
It's different in different industries. In the software industry and the large tech industries, tech companies, marketing and sales have both been kind of leaders of the charge. But in manufacturing, I'm surprised by, of course I speak to marketers, but it's marketers have gotten the mandate from the CEO. So in some industries, it is a mandate from the CEO, and a board level mandate. So the whole idea of customer obsession, we've been beating this drum for a number of years, maybe I don't even know how many years, but the idea of customer obsession has been around since the late 80s, I think. And so there's, it was when I joined Forrester 12 years ago, people would still be asking me, like, why do I need to be customer obsessed? What do you mean by customer obsessed? And now it's like, how? They want to know how and how fast.
Okay. So the third pillar we haven't talked about yet, which is technology and using tech differently. Can we get specific here? And do you have any examples?
Well, again, I think that we're so inside out with our thinking about tech. We look at tech as a way of automating our processes, taking cost out of our processes, better integrating our processes, which is a good thing, but with still an inside-out perspective. The leaders are those places where tech itself is part of the aligned goals. They understand the customer-facing initiatives, strategic initiatives the company's trying to do, and they will figure out, how can we add value? How can we create value? Sometimes that's new products. I mean, look at the whole Internet of Things thing. It is really about saying, I've got data here that I'm getting from these sensors that are my products. How can I use that to create a new product? And in a lot of cases, it was the technology part of the company that figured out there's incremental value in this data more than the marketing and sales parts of the company. So there's value in there really is making the technology leadership part of the innovating on value equation, but also adding to that value exchange at all stages, taking away friction from the engagement at all stages.
So again, I got the data example, and I'm thinking about, gosh, everything from CRM to, marketing automation to, the ABM tools that allow you to look at intent data. And I'm just sort of wondering where, yes, automate, yes, integrate, yes, cost, but a lot of these tools are really used, in my mind, to sort of develop plays, right? And execute plays against a given group of people. And I think probably the biggest structural change in the uses of this is, at least with intent data, there's a chance of adding value because that person or persons or company is in the market at least. And
right. I think that this is an interesting, I hate to keep going back to mindset shift all the time, but honestly, I think I'm always backing people up. It seems I'm always going back to, what is the go-to-market strategy, which is not so much about, are they in market for this product, about getting more audience-centric. And I had a little epiphany a few years back when somebody said they had done buyer journey mapping, but they had done buyer journey mapping for buying this product. And then this was really doubled down when I was talking to a manufacturer of medical scientific testing equipment. And I said, when someone is trying to buy, this mass spectrometry system from you, what are they trying to achieve? Well, the answer I got was, well, they're trying to buy a mass spectrometry system. I'm like, okay, but why? And it really took, in workshopping, easily 30 minutes, maybe more, to say, well, sometimes they need to run more assays in order to get to a different audience, or they're opening up a new lab, or they're this, or they're that. Marketers don't think enough about the outcomes our clients are trying to achieve. They just don't. We think about, I do a little exercise where I just go through how we go from product to value, and how, and creation of value statements. And every one of us, and myself included, has said, okay, I've got a product. I'm stuck with this product. I have this product. What does it do? Well, you kind of can figure it into solutions, because I have lots of products. So what does it do? What problem does that solve? Who has that problem? And so we think we're being solution focused and buyer centric and value oriented. But all too often that's a recipe that gets you on the number 6 on a list of 3 things I'm going to do this year, right? It's true, it's legitimate. It's just not, it's not what is top of mind to the buyer. So the flip is, there are economic buyers and key decision makers that we know are the buyers for our products. And then saying, what outcomes are they trying to achieve? And how do I reliably, if I call on this, or this person stumbles across my content, 3 to 5 things that they're reliably trying to achieve. And then how do I address those? And then my proof points about why I do that better than anybody else. And when you flip it that way, you're still going through the exact same boxes, but in the reverse order, you have a much better chance of resonating. But it's really difficult to make that flip. That's one of the hardest ones, because you basically realize that you're not taking to market a basket full of products and services and solutions. You're taking to market a basket full of outcomes you deliver for specific audiences. And every time you focus like that, I always say the flip side of focus is exclusion, or exclusion is the flip side of focus. And as soon as marketers start to do that and say, we're going to put, like, to use Scott McNeely's old phrase, all of the wood behind these arrows, someone will come out and say, but we just got a 7-figure deal over there doing that. And it's like, that was the one you were going to get. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you. But, it's really tough though. And that's why I think marketers need to, and again, I don't mean to say your audience and the people on this call and listening are not doing this, but there's always we need to step up into a higher level of leadership. There's still too much providing service to the organization. And with the shift toward, first of all, with more data-driven strategies, with the shift toward more digital engagement, we really need to level up and accept the mantle, and to be honest, fight for the mantle of, if we're going to help our company succeed, of a higher level of strategic leadership in the company.
So first of all, this is, people don't buy, don't want a shovel, they want a hole, they don't want a flashlight, they want the light and illumination. And again, these are sort of old truisms, yet we still need to be reminded of it. But I have another thought that I wonder if this is part of this, is CMOs have a limited period of time in which to show and demonstrate quick wins and buy the credibility and build trust in order to do something transformational, right? Often that transformation looks like brand or a new website or a new, perhaps, go-to-market. But I'm curious, with this particular approach of customer-obsessed growth engine, how long does it take, and do CMOs have the time? Can they do this and get it done and see the results in time to keep them, longer than the average?
Well, the good news is that one of the big HR companies has just come out, recruitment companies, and they've measured the tenure of CMOs, and CMOs are only 1 month short of the average tenure in the C-suite. So the tenure, it was like 4.1 or 4.3 years. So So that's getting better, but still, no one's going to come on board and say, I'm going to flip our entire go-to-market approach and check in 4 years. Or look, I'm not going to do what we did last year because I got a new idea, and what we're going to do something completely different. So you have to keep it. You have to drive change while you're keeping the lights on, and so and continuing to do what you have done successfully. So that's why piloting is so important, and that's also why piloting a tractable problem, and also making sure that you have. Let's say it is going to take 3 years to get to the nirvana state on this. What's going to happen in year 1? What's going to happen in year 2? What are proxies, proxy metrics for we're on our way? So there's CMOs, I have to say, even CMOs who are very seasoned in tenure have sometimes not run the kind of designed and managed the kind of transformational initiatives that we're talking about. And so that's another thing in terms of realizing that you might be out of, you might be stepping into something that you don't have all the muscle memory for. And so once there are multiple ways of shoring up a potential shortfall, reading research resources, hiring someone who is good at this. That's one thing. But mainly I would go back to, sadly, we do have to still build the trust, deliver the numbers, deliver the support, bring new insights to the company about customers, which often means creating new processes to gain those insights. The number one challenge in our most recent survey, the number one challenge that was cited most frequently by the audience in terms of meeting their next 12-month goals was better management of data and insights. So, again, we've talked about being data driven for years, but how many people in the marketing organization are really good at data visualization and looking at raw data and seeing patterns and seeing opportunities? It's the few, not the many.
I want to stop for a second and I want to put a little pin on something and get some clarity. So I love the idea, and I think every CMO will embrace the idea. Yeah, I need a pilot, and the notion of naming it and having it be something that is customer obsessed, whatever that is, and getting that going makes sense, and having a benchmark for that. But I love this is what should happen year 1, year 2, year 3, your proxy measures. And that assumes that they understand and know how to do this, that they know how to do it, right? And number 2, and then they know how to measure it so that they can manage expectations, which is what you were talking about, year 1, year 2, year 3. And so I'm wondering, what does that look like? And I know we don't have all day, so you have to, it's going to force you to, but how do you roll something like this out so that we're not trying to do it all in one bite?
So you mentioned that my own personal background is I have a lot of experience being a CMO, being a marketing leader. And my first thing is to say, fight our own urge to get it done. Marketers are extremely positive in terms of a can-do attitude. I mean, if you tell any salesperson that any sales exec, he's got to double revenues next year, he's going to say, then double my staff. You tell any marketer that they need to do it, it's like, can I have more budget, please? And if not, okay, I'll step up to it. We just are very can-do. And I'm going to just say that across the board, but, and I think it's a good thing, but we have to quell our own enthusiasm a little bit and recognize that, what is this really going to take? I'm going to be doing this with, I don't talk to anybody whose team isn't totally overloaded. So there's also the, how am I going to break this down into manageable chunks? And what chunks add value? Because you chunk the large trends, and you chunk it into, what does add value. I mean, if it's simply going to, by doing better targeting and segmentation, I'm going to increase the ROI on my initial demand gen. Okay, that's not really that's not really all the way to customer obsession, because we really want to say that will eventually allow me to build the products that customer wants. But if that just increases my ROI on my demand gen, that's a win, right? And I can claim it. I know where it's headed. And I want everybody else to know it's a step on a path. But so it's definitely chunking it down to things that the company will recognize as value. And I think honestly, it's our own let's get it done attitude. Because if you think that, you're just going to give up, because you know how busy you are, you know what demands there are, and it's going to, it's almost like training your own mind to think in incrementalism.
Okay. So you also mentioned that this part of this process and the critical core, if you're going to be customer obsessed, part of it is having some insights to drive that obsession. And you then sort of link that to marketers may or may not have the ability to get the data that will help them get to the insights. And it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking of several CMOs that I know that have managed to bring their data person with them to 3 consecutive jobs because they're so good and they know how important that is. And I've always felt that the number one hire for, almost any B2B CMO, if they don't have one, is someone who can do the data and really help that CMO know, try to separate the garbage out, the noise, and find the insight. And we also talked about they have too many tools already, or they're not using their tools right. So you gave one insight. I'd love to have one more sort of example of an insight that helped a company become more customer obsessed.
So the one thing I would say is, stop thinking about data driven and start thinking about insight driven, because not all insights come from data. Let's just recognize that there is tacit knowledge. There are things our organization learns every day about how value is realized by customers, and there's a lot to be said from very old-fashioned techniques like talking to our salespeople but setting up regular processes for these things. I mean, I was head of a knowledge management initiative once, and so much of it was just old school setting up, sharing, like communities that that shared on a regular basis knowledge that was gained here and needed to be used there. This was in a small company, so this doesn't scale, but it was an interesting idea. I realized in my small company, we might have been about 50 million, we didn't know so many things about our customer base in marketing. And I thought, well, every time our company touches a customer or a buyer, what do we learn and how could we capture it? And so we actually changed our processes because we thought about it. How do we gain insight? And we changed our processes. Now, every time you change processes, does it work? No, but it works. You can change culture and mindset by changing process as well as doing it the other way around. So it is insights, not data. And then in terms of answering your actual question, though, I think maybe an example of insights is there was a company that was selling something very horizontal, networking solutions, and they made a bet on outcomes that they were going to enable, and they really instantiated on their website. They had navigation paths around. Okay, does your network need better edge protection? Do you need more resiliency in the cloud? I don't remember the actual solutions, but they engineered like 5 navigation paths around outcomes. And then they basically they made that decision. Every time you make almost any decision with regard to customers and segmentation and outcomes, it's a hypothesis. So it was a hypothesis, but they put into place a very easy way to test it, which was web navigation. And they realized that they were getting 3 times the traffic on this versus that. So it's, that was an example where they just made a decision to make that call, because before they had been totally focused around, they weren't, they had benefits on their website. They even had roles on their website, but they hadn't made that bet about the outcomes they were going to enable. And so when they did that, took that chance, and they learned, and they said, okay, we're better off doubling down on, and taking this particular, let's say it was data center, 3 or 4 data center, 3 or 4 data center let's say it was resiliency in the cloud or whatever, and creating 3 sub outcomes in that, because that's what people clearly are doing. So that's an example of where this pivot in thinking, the small steps yielded like quick results.
Okay, we're getting to the end of our conversation, sadly, but we talked at the very beginning that customer obsessed growth engine is about more than simply helping to keep customers and upsell and cross-sell, that this is a mindset shift and an organizational shift that has impact on almost every aspect of the business, but certainly marketing, sales, and product. So, and it takes some time and a lot of time actually to make this happen. How, and again, I'm going to go back to something, and I'm just going to maybe make you repeat yourself, but how does this end up driving in increased sales among new customers?
I think that that 2 ways. One, if we have made those, if we, as an organization, this is where I think it starts at alignment on what is that market basket of outcomes that we're taking to audiences. We have to get agreement between product marketing and sales on that. Then marketing will be able to better articulate the benefits of that out, better articulate how we're going to get you there, right? And also they're better tripwires, right? A lot of marketing is still throwing pretty broad nets. An analogy I use is throwing a broad net and then sorting it all out, versus fly fishing, where I've built the content that is going to attract a wide mouth bass, if there is such a thing. And so we'll be more effective there, but also we can train the sales reps, enable the sales reps to have better conversations. Product will start building, not because it's the next cool thing or because we can. And mind you, innovation is good. It takes you to new markets. I'm not saying that, but they'll start saying what's necessary in our product to really better enable the value. But even in marketing's case, thinking about the whole life cycle, which is another part of the value across the life cycle. I talk to a lot of marketers when I say, what has to happen after the sale for your customer to realize the value they invested in? And they're not sure. They just haven't thought about it, right? So I'd say you need to create your value realization architecture so you understand, because all the way through this process, this buyer is going to be thinking about how am I going to make this happen? How is this going to deliver value for me? And so we need to be thinking about, again, that value, the value realization thing. So it's I forget the question. I hope that was an answer.
It's okay. Because as you were talking, I was thinking about a story that I tell in my book that I think is a perfect summary of the things that you're talking about, the notion of customer obsession. So I was on the board of directors of our co-op, and we needed to renovate the hallways of the building. None of us of the 7 on the committee had ever done this before. So we had 3 construction companies come in to bid on the job, and we thought it was a hallway project. Well, the 3rd one comes in and says, so, when we asked him, what do you guys do? We only do hallways for co-ops and condos. And he said, and by the way, here are the 10 emails that you're going to want to send to your shareholders during the process, because there's going to be a lot of potential complaints. And suddenly we realized that this was not about hiring a hallway company. We were in the complaint mitigation business. And this individual then went on to tell us that, oh, by the way, we budget 10% of our process, a construction process, into cleanup, so that every day the hallways are vacuumed, and we even have sanders that absorb the dust, because again, we're trying to mitigate the amount of complaints that you get during the process. The easiest decision that we ever made. And by the way, the other part of the story was that they were obsessed with this one thing. That's all they did in the world of co-op. So we got value realization and outcomes as well.
Yeah.
By this, and it's a construction company, but it was really, really helpful. All right. So let's wrap up with 2 do's and 1 don't for B2B CMOs who want to help their companies become more customer obsessed.
So number one on my do's is definitely focus on value as perceived by the customer. And still in that same do is recognize that value manifests in different dimensions. There's economic value, there's prestige value, and there is, there are many dimensions of value. That's number one is relentless focus on value, and also realize that there's nothing inherently, the value is not inherent in our product. It is inherent in the customer's ability to achieve a business outcome. So that's one, value, value, value. The second is life cycle. I just cannot say how much I believe that it is the responsibility of the marketing organization to develop the engagement strategy that moves the customer successfully through across the buying journey, or helps the customer move across the buying journey. And so it's value, life cycle. And then I guess my don't is don't let short-termism derail you. It's a reality. We only have so much time to deliver results as marketers. Our company only has so much time to gain revenue as companies, as entities. So it's a reality. Just work with it, but don't let it derail you.
Right. Yeah. I think that last point is so important, because it's sort of have your quick wins, understand what those look like. We created a whole quick wins cheat sheet for new CMOs, just so that they could buy the time to make the meaningful change that will really demonstrate leadership and show what marketing is capable of doing, which is transformative. Well, Lori Wizdo from Forrester, thank you so much for all of your insights. I really appreciate you being with us.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I enjoyed the conversation, Drew.
All right, then. So if you're a B2B CMO, if you're not in CMO huddles, do me a favor, visit cmohuddles.com. We'll talk about some of the outcomes that will help you, as we say, inspire B2B greatness. Okay, until next time, I'm Drew Neiser.